Go for it.
Alrighty, the magic button is pushed and we are online. Alright. Guten Abend, my dear friends. We are running. And tonight I'm joined with my good friend Shaun Pinner. You know him. Yesterday we did interview, and like traditionally I thought, why not? Why not invite this amazing person to my stream as well? Considering that you guys were asking me about this for a while already. So Shaun, welcome to my channel. It's a big pleasure and actually honor to have you here. How are you doing?
Really well. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy to spend 2 nights with you. So it's good. We can talk all things Ukrainian.
Absolutely. And today we will have some news review, some chat, and speaking of today's stream, guys, someone just Nila in the chat earlier asked me like, why do you consider going to the German gas station as something dangerous, like for real? Because I said that I feel starving, so I'm gonna rush to the gas station, and if I don't return, remember me the way I was, bald and divorced. And Neil is like, why do you consider going to the German gas station as something dangerous? So here's the example. I'm going to this gas station because I'm starving, and actually they were selling like those amazing cheesecakes there all the time. Every single time I'm there, and I'm not hungry. They sell amazing cheesecake, fresh, just baked, and I'm like. I'm going there in my car with the cheesecake in mind. And when I arrive, what I see is like a bunch of croissants. Well, okay, I buy a croissant, and my friends, we just talked about this with Shaun. In the movies, in the literature, in the culture generally, especially like 90s, 70s, they always portray Germans as villains, all right, as like anti-heroes, as like cruel, cunning people, evil genius and stuff like that, which I always thought was just like a crazy cliche. But what should I think now when you like look at that croissant? The white stuff on it is actually salt. what the hell?
You're gonna die of a heart attack.
Yeah. So I did something unholy. I literally took knife. I scraped that salt of the croissant. I ate it. And basically, I hope I will survive until midnight. But anyways, so Shaun, what are you busy with these days? Tell us. What's new on the other side of the screen?
I don't know where to start. I'm a journalist now, I suppose. I think I've taken what's happened with Mariupol and the events in Ukraine and myself and really sort of spun that around. Really, I'm probably one of a handful of Westerners that lived in Donbass and Donetsk Oblast, before the full-scale invasion. So it's made me sort of, I don't want to use the word pundit, but I certainly, as we discussed last night, somebody who was in the wrong place at the right time. So
Yeah.
having lived here for a number of years, I'm able to talk about some degree about politics and some degree about the military aspect of it, more so that having served with the Ukrainian Marines and the National Guard. So I'm sort of able to talk about things, and really nobody wanted to know who I was for 2 years, and now sort of everybody wants to take me on board and as a sort of fixer and a journalist, and my life's sort of changing. I'm now writing more and doing more sort of commentary on the situation in Ukraine.
Sounds great. And yesterday I asked you what the good day looks like to you these days, and you mentioned something really, really good, actually, the food. Because this is a tradition on my channel, we always talk about food here because I like to torture people, right? With like showing different pictures. What is the best thing you've had over the past week?
Well, you got to split that down into two, I suppose. My favourite, probably Ukrainian dish is not borscht. Funny enough, it's probably either sernakit, the little cheese pancakes, or that Hungarian spicy dish. The name I forget quite now, but it's bogrich or something
Bograch.
like that. I like bogrich. And I'm big into soups now. I never was, but I still miss a good Sunday roast in the UK. Roast beef or roast chicken, and I brought roast potatoes to the house, which my wife had never had, and she can't get enough of roast potatoes. Good roast potatoes now. That's if we can get the power on to do a Sunday roast on a Sunday, that's a pretty good Sunday.
Absolutely. We have some commentaries. First of all, my friends, the reason you didn't hear Shaun well was my fault, all right? Because last time when we were recording, I lowered your levels and I completely forgot to bring them back, so now you're back. But another thing, we have a commentary from Ivan there in the chat. Ivan is my good friend. It's very, very good to see you. And by the way, happy birthday, because Ivan has birthday. Yeah, has birthday today. We are all sending our wishes and congratulations and everything else. So thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. And also big hello to your guys as well. And as always, be safe, of course, and treat yourself with something good. All right, and also, by the way, we have Sparky projects from a place not far from Cardiff Oblast, South Wales. You probably know, Shaun, that if you want to make Ukrainians smile, you gotta mention your oblast. Like not like I'm coming from Washington. I'm coming from Washington Oblast. For some reason, I don't know. Like Ukrainians feel extremely happy when you say that. But
is that Washington D.C. Oblast or Washington State Oblast? See, yeah. I don't know. You see.
I have no idea. There's so many of them. But do you know something about Cardiff, by the way? Why Cardiff is so legendary in the...
I got a story about Cardiff. I did go and see West Ham and Liverpool in the cup final there, and I lost my ticket. And the good guy on the gate believed me and let me in with my brother-in-law, and we went in to see one of the best FA Cup soccer finals I could ever remember. We lost, but it was still a good... session afterwards. We had beer with the Liverpool fans and got drunk, and what was one of the best FA Cup finals I can remember. I think it was something like Liverpool won 4-3 and on penalties or something like that. It was just remarkable experience considering I lost my ticket. That was my only experience of Cardiff.
Is it true that they say that Cardiff football hooligans are like savage?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't say on Cardiff. Certainly, West Ham's historically, my team, West Ham, has had a pretty checkered past with that. And everywhere I went in Ukraine, when they said, "What team do you support?" At West Ham, they said, "Oh, Green Street, the movie. We love that film." And I was like, it's a bit of an 80s thing for the actual West Ham's checkered past. And their rivalry with Chelsea, which ironically, it was Roman Abramovich that helped my release from captivity. So not only did I suffered as a West Ham supporter, I had to have the former owner of Chelsea bail me out of captivity. So I don't know what I'm most embarrassed about, to be honest.
Oh my God, that's crazy. That's basically the reason why I know about Cardiff, because I watched several documentaries even on Cardiff football hooligans, and then when the full-scale invasion hit. Basically, the legend of Cardiff was born again, because according to the Russian propagandists, poor people in Cardiff have to do prostitution to survive because they are struggling.
Even the men.
Apparently, because all the women do prostitution while all the men are hunting birds from the trees. I'm not kidding. They were saying that like people are eating birds and stuff like that. Yeah. All that is because people of Cardiff are suffering without the Russian gas, and like all the economy collapses and everything like that. Well, usual stuff, like rotting West, all that. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, they're always like, I mean, hearing those the Russian propaganda, I've been on the other side. I've heard that all those sorts of things that the Russians have been mentioning. So yeah, it's bizarre some of the things they come up with.
Absolutely. And you had to literally, when you had opportunity, you literally had to watch that all the time, literally, when you were in the captivity.
Yeah, you can't get away from it. I mean, like I said to you last night, I'd had some training in resistance training, part of my 9 years in the British military. So I had an understanding of what it was like to be captured. But I think, when you're thrust into it, I think propaganda was probably the hardest thing I had to deal with, especially when they brought in the Western accented propagandists who, why they're there, because they want to resonate with the countries that they're from. So Graham Phillips in Aidan Aslin's case, and Roman Kazarev from RT, who was a part of my interrogation, who spoke with a Western accent. So that's what they're using for. So yeah, I mean that's pretty hard to swallow. That sort of style propaganda, when it's designed to get to the UK and to America.
They actually used him to interrogate you.
Yeah, I mean, Aidan was high profile. He was in the media. They used Graham Phillips, who's recently this week or last week in the news because he filmed himself with dead Ukrainian soldiers, and he was letting the, animals and pigs eat them, which made the headlines in the UK, which is absolutely gross and a war crime and disgusting. And this is a propagandist who's shouting, Russians have been hard done by, and he's pushing their propaganda, who's frequently on RT and RT Russia Today. Were the guys that interviewed me who came in with their narrative and their justification for the war, pushing tomorrow's agenda and asking me why I was a Nazi fighting for, Ukraine. And they ceased to mention the fact that I never actually left the country I had legal status in, and they invaded, and I'm not by any means a Nazi. I literally signed a contract with the Marines, Ukrainian Marines. So under the Geneva Conventions, I'm entitled to the treatment as a POW, and Russia decided to ignore it. So I don't put too much stock in propaganda. And this week alone, you've just seen Zelensky in Kupiansk today. Apparently, according to Putin, 4 weeks ago, that was already taken. That was Russian. So, I don't put too much stock into that. Again, with Pokrovsk, I'm pretty well known for my views on that. And 5 weeks ago, Putin was saying along the lines of, he'd invite the journalists to come and see Pokrovsk for. And, there's still to this day, it's not fully fair, and it's still ongoing. So, the Russian propaganda is a bit laughable. It's not moved on in 30, 40 years, to be fair. I mean, some elements have, but, especially with the internet and social media, but generally it's the same old Russia. I think in Saving Private Ryan, they said the Statue of Liberty is kaput, and it's pretty much like that, now. It's very similar just on social media now, Pokrovsk is kaput, Kupiansk is kaput. It's not quite the case. So, it's Russian propaganda. Everybody knows it.
Yeah, but unfortunately, a lot of people fall for it. However, on the other hand, you as a Brit, you can confirm that British people have some sort of mysterious immunity to the Russian propaganda. For some reasons, I literally cannot explain. Like, what's your secret? What's the magic?
I don't know if it's magic. I think we know what they've done in the UK. I think they've used chemical weapons. They've attacked, British citizens on British soil, and they have no remorse about that. And I think I don't think that's just the Brits. I think that's pretty much everyone bordering or has been occupied by the Soviets in present time. I went to Lithuania and Estonia this year, and I've been to Poland. Certainly, Poland's gearing up for this big time. They understand what's coming, and certainly when I was in captivity, the Russians made it clear where they wanted to go next, and that was Poland. So I don't think it's just the Brits. I think there's a lot. Most of Europe feels like that. Especially if you've been occupied by the Soviets, and people say, oh, well, that's the Soviets. And I sit there and say, hold on, it's still run by the Kremlin. It's just the same meat, different gravy. It's still the same shit, So, I purposely try and talk to people about that, and about, as why I'm here is that I talk to people about what it's like on the ground and what it's like to have Russia as your neighbor. It's just that I was born in London, but I've spent most of my last 10 years in Ukraine. Sorry, I caught you drinking then. I'm going to have a sip as well. I got wine tonight. It's Friday, so...
Cheers. Wine is a good option. Yeah, I have to drink coffee, otherwise I will just stop running. And we have a commentary from Sarah, by the way, who says... Oh my God, where was the comment? Who says, I wonder what will happen to general that said Pokrovsk had been conquered. Dear Sarah, this is a very interesting question, and I will probably show you something. So here we have, sorry, let me scroll a bit. Here we have an image of situation in Kupiansk, all right? That is Kupiansk town. This is was been happening there on 11th of, wait a second, on 12th of November. This year, and already this is the picture today, all right? Wait, 11th of December, and this one is 12th of December. So basically you can understand that the Russians are, let's call it for the way it is, they are being encircled there. That's called operational encirclement. And only 2 days ago, I was showing that amazing video, that Russian commander in Kupiansk recording videos every single day, starting like early November, saying our unit is finishing clearing the Kupiansk city from Ukrainian militants, and then 2 days later he's like, we continue finishing, and then after 2 weeks he's like, yes, we are continuing, and basically that's where he is now. So like of course they can produce a lot of different cringy videos and stuff like that. We will talk about that today, but not always what they say is true. For example, let me remind you also this one, all right? So here we have Gerasimov, Shoigu, где снаряды, блядь? So what he says.
Соединения группировки «Запад» освободили город Купянск.
So he basically says that the units of the West group liberated the town of Kupiansk.
И продолжает уничтожение формирований вооруженных сил Украины, окруженных на левом берегу реки Оскол.
And they continue eliminating the remains of the Ukrainian troops that are being surrounded on the left bank of river Oskol. Okay, let's take a look. Apparently he's talking about like these guys, all right, that are surrounded on the left bank. So that is the picture, all right, nowadays. Shaun, what do you think about this?
There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, seriously, I mean, I've been seeing it. I suppose it's come to light now, but we've been seeing this for a couple of years now. Certainly, if I went far back as during my captivity when I was held at Makivka, certainly when I was held there and taken there in June before my trial, there was really no artillery, no essentially Ukrainians I could hear in the distance. But by the time I was exchanged in September, they'd moved within 4 kilometers of Makivka. And mortars were coming in and tank rounds were coming into the actual prison. So, and even when I was in captivity, The actual inmates of the prison, because I was in general population, would complain about the lack of information on their own news, which was quite enlightening, because we could actually hear the Ukrainians coming closer and closer, and thought we'd get liberated long before we'd ever get exchanged. So we've been hearing that for some time. Yes, certainly, I don't believe anything now. I wrote a paper for CEPA, the American think tank, about Pokrovsk, when everyone had said it fallen, and it's the end of the world, and the Ukrainian lines are collapsing, and I was sort of one of a few people that was saying it's just not the case. You don't really understand it, and you only have to go down there. I've been there, and I was there in November last year, sort of saying there's a second, third, fourth defensive positions. Then you've got dragon's teeth, razor wire. Then you've got artillery, drones, and layers of drones, and infantry there. I said, even if Pokrovsk fell, you would have to do that all over again. And look at how many casualties that Russia has sustained in Pokrovsk. So I refer to it as the farmhouse at Waterloo, Hougoumont, where Napoleon, really, the Battle of Waterloo was really around that farm complex, which was pretty significant to the Battle of Waterloo, just a few farmhouses. Well, Pokrovsk is, what, you probably better than me, 76th largest town in Ukraine, but the Russians are making a absolute song and dance about this. It's not a town anymore. I mean, it's a shell of a city town. 60,000 people. It's nothing like it was before. It's just a position on a map now. And yet they rolled out Solyov today, who's in Pokrovsk, giving Putin a win. This is all about aesthetics to a domestic audience. So my job is to really sort of explain to Westerners that, how far Pokrovsk is from Donetsk, where they started 4 years ago, and say, well, actually, it's about 70 kilometers. That's where, and they've lost over 4 years, nearly 4 years of fighting, sustained 1.1 million casualties for, 68 kilometers. Whereas Russia will tell you they've conquered Ukraine 3 times. I mean, this is where we're fighting that narrative on such platforms as X, where RT is allowed to advertise still outside of Europe, and we're fighting that Russian narratives on the X platform, and Rumble, and where they're allowed to air their wares. So this is much bigger. I've been saying it for years. This is much bigger than just a regional conflict. We're already essentially in a world war. Essentially, just not every country in the world is fighting yet. But if you think about where this war has escalated to, it's already hit Israel, Iran and North Korea supplying weapons, and China to an extent supplying, logistics to Russia to support their campaign in Europe. And now you've got Venezuela kicking off, which is Russia's already dropped missiles and air defense into Venezuela, and had Wagner in there in the last, 2 years. So this is essentially a world war, whether we choose to accept it or not. But Russia's main aim is to really, really push Europe apart from America, and because NATO's a considerable adversary for Russia, and they know it. They don't want to get in a fight with NATO. So this is all part of the problem we have now, which we can talk about a bit later rather than all now. But this is the problem we've got now with Trump regurgitating Russian propaganda and excluding Europe for talks in Russia. And this is becoming a far bigger problem very, very quickly.
Yeah, we have a commentary. Whoa, I caught a live stream and Shaun Pinner is here. I read his book. It was very powerful. So you already have some people who read your book in this chat as well, which is not surprising. And speaking of Trump, oh my God! So there was such a mess this morning. Like, I published your video, the link to your video in my community posts on YouTube, and all right, I confess, to attract people's attention, I also posted a photo of Trump wearing red hat. Saying Russian whore. And the reason I did it was because like he looks so natural. I was impressed. Like AI generated, like of course it was AI generated, like AI generated his face like to look so real, you know, like the red hat, the face, and I'm like, wow, like look at that. So I think this photo will go very well, like with any link on my community post. And some of the people started ranting like, why do you trash Donald Trump and stuff like that, guys. I will tell you this, all right? Like I base this on my personal observation. People who trash Donald Trump, they become successful. Look at JD Vance.
Yeah.
At the same time,
Like
people who appease Donald Trump, appease Donald Trump, sorry, they become miserable. Look at Elon Musk. Look at Tucker Carlson. Look at MTG.
Yeah.
So basically,
well, that's probably a bad example because she's fallen out with Trump now, hasn't she?
yeah, but she became miserable basically, like in his eyes. So you gotta trash Donald Trump if you want to be a successful person. Like it works like that.
Yeah, you do. I think probably MTG will be promoted before long. She'll be running the country or something like that. I don't know, but she's I mean, you have to Trump. I mean, for us, it's very difficult. We need America on board, and the way I describe it is that Ukrainians are so polite that they've now bracketed Americans into three categories. So they've got the Biden lot, then they've got the Trump administration when it all goes to shit and it's all bad, and then when it all goes right and they get some money, they go call it America. Because they don't want to offend anybody, because everybody knows there's a lot of support for Ukraine in America. Certainly within the Republicans, they're making an issue of this now. And especially since the strategic review, they're certainly kicking up now in support of Ukraine. So you know, there is a lot of support in America for Ukraine. So yeah, you have to balance that criticism of Trump with what you see. And unfortunately, we know in Ukraine that we've seen far more that's actually reported. You know, he's met Zelensky's opposition. He's tried to undermine Ukraine. My wife lost her job because of the USAID cuts. And, you know, and when you see that, as soon as he's come in, that's only helping Russia. All of what he's done has helped Russia. Now he's not actually supplying very much at all. He's making NATO buy the weapons. So, and then you look at the rhetoric. It's solely Russian narratives he's repeating. So it's very difficult not to criticize Trump. But I've been for years. I mean, the only time my attitude swayed was when Lindsey Graham came to Ukraine and sold the killer sanctions, which never happened. It got the most skeptical of us going, oh, maybe the Trump administration aren't so bad. Maybe they do get it. Well, they didn't come in, and look at what's happened now. I mean, it's just disgusting. So, you know, I said in February this year, don't put too much optimism and peace, and I'll stand by that until at least March next year. Putin's got one more spring offensive in him, and I think he'll go for that in spring once the cold weather's gone. I don't think there's going to be any peace.
I agree on that. Russia doesn't need peace. Like, Russia didn't start the whole war in order to all of a sudden have peace. And there is no peace in Russian strategy whatsoever. That's, again, something that people should understand, because in Russian strategy, that is a long-term plan for basically conquering the European continent, at least, all right? And there's no place for peace. And also, we just had a commentary from our American friend, from Russell, who says, I'm American. If you're not criticizing Trump, you're part of the problem. Which, again, I completely agree, because, look, us, Ukrainians, Shaun, you will confirm this, I'm sure, that us, Ukrainians, we don't really like authorities, all right? Like, we are anarchists. Like, presidents, everybody... yeah, like we understand that the state must function and everything else, but Ukrainians have this phenomenon of zrada in everything, all right? And Ukrainians hate authorities. We don't trust them. We yes, we understand the need to have them. We don't trust them, and that is why we criticize everyone. We criticize Zelensky. We criticize all of his team. When people in his team started getting arrested by Zelensky's machine, by the way. When they started getting arrested, we were happy. We were celebrating. Holy shit, thank God they got arrested.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, do that, please.
For sure. I mean, my wife's not, she doesn't bring anything political up in the house, really. So I was asked my opinion on the war, and I said, they're not pissed off about the war. I live in Dnipro. I speak to, I help my friend who teaches an English speaking class in Dnipro because I'm a native speaker, so I go and support him, and we talk. So I got access to people from the front lines through to ordinary citizens in Dnipro. So I use ideas to bounce off them. None of them were. I mean, the war's here. They can't really do much about it. People are, the power's a problem, but people get on with it. And I said, in a world of echo flows and diesel generators, it's a minor inconvenience at the moment, and the guys who work the power are phenomenal. I don't know how they keep going. Unsung heroes they are. But generally, what angered most people was the corruption scandal. Yeah, man, and where it was going. I mean, my wife for the first time just went, "I'm so angry," and I was like, "Really? What about?" And she just went, "The corruption." I mean, everybody's just so angry about it. And then you had the protests in the summer because of the corruption, and there was that scene where everybody was so angry but nobody stepped on the grass because there was a sign that said "Do not step on the grass." So everyone was angry, but they were careful to walk around on the concrete and not to step on the grass. That's how I really sort of sum up Ukraine, really. It's pretty much like that. When they're unhappy, they're unhappy. Look at Maidan. If they were really unhappy, they would show it, and they did at Maidan. So, it's probably we've got more freedom, which is one of the things you asked me last night was what attracted me to Ukraine. I probably didn't stretch on that enough, but one of the things that attracted me here was that freedom and democracy that, America should be promoting, not tearing it down. I mean, it's like this is, a very conservative and religious country. It's very, it wants to be democratic. It wants to command its own destiny. Everything that scares Putin. So I don't understand Trump's stance on it. I don't understand essentially by byproduct America's stance on it because he was the elected president. So I don't get it. I don't know why there's not much pressure on America, Russia at the moment. I don't understand why this is an ICC wanted war criminal. Whether, America didn't sign up to the Rome Statute. So generally, but there's ethics there, and there's the fact that Russia stole, estimated 30,000 Ukrainian children. I watched them slaughter 25,000 plus civilians in Mariupol, including women and children, predominantly Russian speakers. I was a Russian speaker. My family, we've lost our house. I was literally put through a sham process along with all my Ukrainian friends in a sham trial. So, I've seen this firsthand. So I'm really, as a 80s kid who grew up with Michael Jackson, Madonna, Carl Lewis was like running rain around the athletics track. Reagan was king, he can do anything wrong. To now where we're at today, just thinking, where the fuck is America gone? Where the hell has it gone? Where's the America I grew up with? To seeing this now, the Russian warlord that was on, on American propaganda this week. So it's just barbaric the way how this American government or the Trump administration has just taken America apart so quickly. Going back to the USAID, taking the humanitarian aid from Ukraine was just vicious. It was cruel. These people need this support and soft power from America that now China are just moving into that area now. They're moving into that area of soft power now. So it's a massive mistake that's going to have a detrimental effect on America for a long time to come. Not to mention the trust that's been broken down between America and Europe now, and the Five Eyes, which is quite important to Ukraine, and the intelligence sharing between those nations. Everything now Trump's just put in jeopardy.
I agree on that. And by the way, I myself, back in early 2000s, I actually worked with several USAID projects in Ukraine. So I know just how important they were for Ukrainian people, for all sorts of sectors, medical care, education, everything. Ukraine relied big time on the support from the United States. And actually, Ukrainians appreciated big time. But speaking of Trump, my personal opinion, if you want to hear it, is that we should always base our position, all right, on one of two things. Is either how legal it is or how moral it is, all right? And speaking of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, all right, from the standpoint of law, of course it's not legal. A Russian invasion of Ukraine cannot be justified by whatever reasons they're pushing, like NATO expansion, American biolabs, combat locusts genetically modified by American scientists and stuff like that. Whatever they're pushing, their invasion is not legal. Their invasion in Ukraine is not legal. It's not justified at all from the standpoint of United Nations, from the standpoint of all the agreements that were made between Ukraine and Russia. 2003, when Putin himself signed agreement with Ukrainian President Kuchma, corrupted as fuck again, but still, he signed agreement recognizing Ukrainian borders, including Crimea, Donbass, and everything else. So he violated everything. They violated the law many times. And from the legal standpoint, Russian invasion is it's illegal as fuck. On the other hand, how moral it is. So let's ask ourselves how moral it is to wear uniform, go to another country and kill people, commit crimes in Bucha, steal toilets, I don't know, the air conditioning units and things like that. How moral it is to wear a uniform, take guns and go to another country and kill people. So Russian invasion is not moral from both standpoints, whatever, no matter how you look at it, but they are not moral, they're not legal. The question is, where is Trump in all that? So what is his position? All right. Does he respect law? Does he want to stop this war because he respects law? Apparently not, because he doesn't care about the territories and stuff like that. Who invaded whom? Sometimes he says in his social media, when he has some kind of spoiled hamburger in the morning, he says that it's Zelensky is the one who started the war and stuff like that. That is freaking ridiculous. From the moral standpoint, again, does he support Ukraine? No, he supports Russia. He's actually trying to save Russian soldiers. And I'm not joking, seriously. Take a look at Suja, all right? As soon as he became a president, first, we can see that the amount of the Russian strikes on Ukraine increased dramatically, instantly, all right? Instantly, because Russians realized that now Ukraine will be receiving less air defense from the United States. And possibly, of course, the United States might stop any further military aid to Ukraine. So they instantly increased the number of attacks on Ukraine. Whatever Trump was talking about, the great progress, in negotiations with the Russians, Putin wants to stop the war. While they're talking on the phone, Putin sends hundreds of drones against Ukrainian cities. How moral is that? He is trying to save Russian soldiers. He's not interested in saving Ukraine. He doesn't care about Ukraine at all. Let's just be honest, all right? Because neither from legal nor from the moral standpoint, Trump doesn't support Ukraine. He's acting against that. Again, Suja was under our control, and Russians allocated between 50 and 100,000 men in that area, and we were receiving all sorts of data on them immediately as soon as Trump became a president and the intelligence exchange stopped. We can see that we had to immediately withdraw from that place. It was under our control for months, and whatever Russians tried to do, they were basically failing. So how can I call it? I don't believe in coincidences that, Trump became a president, all of a sudden, oh my God, Russians can't just counterattacked and Ukrainians had to withdraw from the Kursk Oblast, controlling more than 1,000 square kilometers. Like it's a complete nonsense.
It is. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, or I'm not one of those guys that, really thought that an American president would do this. Certainly, I'm not a conspiracy theorist type person, but you can't help think with, as soon as he made the appointments, I knew something was wrong. As soon as he got Tulsi Gabbard in there, she retweets RT. Russia Today are the very guys that were part of the torture system when I was in captivity, who tortured the other guys. Not physically, but mentally. They knew all the FSB guys. They worked with the MGB, the Ministry of Internal Affairs in the Donetsk People's Republic, self-proclaimed puppet state. So it's generally, they knew all the bad people, and they were just laughing and joking with them. And they were the guys that were saying, "Did you bring your weapons in from the UK?" And I'm like, I wanted to say, "Do you know how stringent the gun laws are in the UK?" It's like. And these were the same people that didn't really understand how the UK media works, or the papers, or the affiliations politically with the papers that they have. So, I was really one way shocked at the stupidity of the people interrogating me, that they didn't know any of this stuff, but also just the naivety that they would believe their own hype, their own propaganda, that, that I was a Nazi. But they weren't. They were just trying to justify their excuse for massacring 25,000 people in Mariupol. And that's what they were doing, kids, children, the lot. So, and they're still doing it now. You see it, even their denials that they still don't hit, they only hit military targets. Yet the West has got proof, and Russian missiles cracking into hospitals in Kiev. So, it's just balmy that people don't really ask questions, especially in the States. They don't ask these questions, like when you sit there and you see the propaganda, and you see the fact that Russia doesn't want international bodies in Ukraine to interfere with the up and coming elections, yet they're an international body that's on the soil of Ukraine interfering with the elections. And you have to just sit there and go, am I the only one that sees this? Apart from all the other Ukrainians. When you hear, the foreign minister's spokeswoman, is it Zakharova, who says, this is cynicism on the part of Zelensky. Whatever you think about Zelensky, hold on a minute. You're the one that's bombing the people you're telling should vote. You're the one that's killing them. And that will kill them if they go to vote. If anything, that's cynicism, that's irony, that's, I don't know, hypocrisy, take your pick. But I just sit there, thinking, why is nobody even challenging that? And the Trump administration don't challenge any of that. They don't say anything to Russia. They don't put any pressure on Russia. They're scared shitless of Russia. So it's pretty hard not to comment on people like Trump, who don't say a word to Russia, who then just say, well, Zelensky, you need to give up more land. And you go, what? Hold on, what did you just say? This is the land of the home, the free and the brave, And to quote my friend's words, I think the US have spent 3 years trying to surrender in a war that they weren't taking part in. It's like bizarre. Biden wasn't much cop, but he wasn't as bad as Trump. And Trump's just given up and started to surrender before they've even fought in a war. So, it doesn't look good on America at the moment. And it's pretty hard not to have some sort of opinion on Trump. And you can believe what you want. I never for once thought, the Russians had compromise. He was Russian. I certainly think now, 6-7 months into it, it's certainly changed my opinion with, how much he's trying to deviate from Epstein. And I'm starting to think, hold on a minute, maybe there's something in that now. But I wasn't before, now I am. I'm absolutely changing the longer this goes on. I'm starting to think the more that he's the decisions that are benefiting Russia isn't just financial. It's because, there's possibly compromise on him in some sort. So it's pretty hard not to think that.
I completely agree with you. That's something that I was thinking about even today. There were a bunch of new photographs published regarding Trump and Epstein, and there's Trump posing with the victims who survived the Epstein's trafficking system. So who knows? Well, I have two questions. One question is rather rhetorical, right? So we all know that in 1987, Trump went to Russia to buy some kind of property in Moscow. The question is actually rhetoric, because what sort of property can you buy in Soviet Moscow if Soviet Union is not a capitalist country? That's question number one. And question number two, probably you can answer that, even though it might probably should be addressed to an American person, but all right, you spend more time on the West than I did, so you might know. We can see, for example, when the American and Russian delegations are having a chat, meeting, discussing, negotiating, drinking beer, fucking geese, I don't know. We can see two main figures, all right? There is Kirill Dmitriev and there is Stephen Witkoff. So, who are they? Stephen Witkoff is a business guy, all right? Let's be honest, he's not a diplomat, he had no education, he's not even a proper politician. He's a businessman, the dude who fixes things, all right? The dude who solves problems. Who is Kirill Dmitriev? Kirill Dmitriev is chief of Russia's sovereign fund, all right? That's the dude who rules the billions made from the Russian oil operations. So basically, Putin always, instead of sending his Minister of Foreign Affairs, instead of sending diplomats or whatever, he always sends his business people, like Kirill Dmitriev, the multi-billionaire dude responsible for Russian oil money, to negotiate with Trump's business people like Steve Witkoff. Why is that happening? Why don't we see, I don't know, American foreign minister talking to Russian foreign minister, which is a proper thing, I think, solving such problems, geopolitical problems, military problems. Why we see literally two guys responsible solely for business, money, transactions, trade, all that stuff, partnership, discussing the future of Ukraine in this war. Why is that happening?
I'm gonna not get on my high horse here in my box. I'm gonna calm it down here, because Rubio is perfectly acceptable to go to the Ukrainian side and discuss things when it comes to Ukraine, but it's totally excluded when it comes to Russia. Why? I mean, even that is deeply, what we say in the UK, dodgy as fuck. It's just dodgy as hell to really even comprehend. If you don't have your state, foreign secretary attending both meetings, he's not going to know what's discussed at the other meeting. He can't really give an opinion that's on an equal plane. He doesn't know what's being discussed. They're going to tell him what he needs to know. It's now seems to be a corporation running the United States for personal gain. That's my assumption. If you've not got state dignitaries at a meeting in Russia, then that's deeply suspicious. The Witkoff, the exposing of Witkoff was done for a reason. The transcripts of his conversations, which somebody out there has got the rest of it and all the other ones. What's to come? I mean, clearly he's teaching the Russians how to manipulate the president of the United States. I mean, that is just phenomenal. I mean, it's bizarre even for that. And then he's still in a job. You've got it, but it doesn't just stop with him. You've got Signalgate, and you've got the chief of war now, you know, Pete Hegseth, you know, who's got previous of using unsecure comms. The only reason you're taught in the military to use unsecure comms is if you want to bypass the system for a specific reason. And generally, I can't understand why Pete Hegseth's in a job. I can't understand why Steve Witkoff's still in a job. I can't understand how they're still getting through each day without Congress, without people now saying, hold on, you need to get rid of these guys. And that's the bit that doesn't really, I'm not really, you know, a political commentator in America. I don't know it inside out. I've had to learn from friends and learn a lot on the way. But I can't understand why nobody's holding them to account, because this is just screams corrupt from the word go. Yeah, this is the guy that's calling Ukraine corrupt, which I just, you know, let's call it for what it is. This is just hypocrisy. And what do we call Russia all the time? They are the kings of hypocrisy. You know, they don't want foreign intervention in elections in Ukraine. Yet they're the foreigners that are intervening in the elections in Ukraine on Ukrainian soil, killing Ukrainians. So, you know, this is, I mean, you know, sometimes you feel like when you're in Ukraine, you're in some sort of madness loop, you know, of hypocrisy. We're in a hypocrisy loop, I think we call it. It's just bizarre. You have one side saying that, you know, the actual democratic country who's actually dealing with corruption is being called corrupt when you've got all that going on. And as a soldier, I'll finish on this. As a soldier, I was never political. I was always, didn't want to go against the you know, my government. If I was going to do anything like this, I wouldn't go against their foreign policy. I was a soldier. I did what I was told. But since I left the military, I've become, I suppose, an activist. I think I'm literally, I hate being hard done by. I don't like the fact that, you know, hypocrisy is now, and playing to the public is now the law, not the law. You know, it's not right. So part of the reasons I got on social media and into the media, now writing columns, not because I was a book writer or because I was an aspiring journalist, but just because I felt so frustrated at the way things were going. People needed to really understand what it was like living in East Ukraine from someone who was Western, who spoke Russian first as a language, not Ukrainian. And that really has taken off in the last, I would say, 12 months to you know, 2 years. So, you know, that's been a long time sort of pushing at that to try and promote Ukraine from a different set of eyes. And now we're looking to do a tour in America in spring to try and get survivors from Ukraine over there to talk to the media, which the American media doesn't seem to want to interview Ukrainians, which is quite bizarre considering they seem to be the experts on how Ukraine is, but you very rarely see a Ukrainian pundit on American TV. So, you know, we're looking to move into that role and try and push that agenda, but it is bizarre. The whole thing is bizarre.
I completely agree with you. On the other hand, probably it's like also natural, considering the fact that Russia is running this hybrid warfare all across the world right now. There was a commentary there in the chat regarding the Marco Rubio. All right, let me remind you what Marco Rubio, and it's Rubio for real, what he was saying in 2014.
When the Soviet Union fell in the early 1990s, Ukraine was left with the world's third largest stockpile of tactical nuclear weapons and strategic nuclear weapons on the planet. But they signed this agreement with the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia that basically said, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we, these three countries that signed to this, will provide for your defense and assure you of your defense. And so Ukraine did that. They gave up these weapons. Well, now, this was signed in 1994, 20 years later, one of the three countries that signed that agreement hasn't just not provided for their defense, they actually invaded them. And I want to make a point on this for a second. Think about if you're one of these other countries around the world right now that feels threatened by your neighbors. And the United States and the rest of the world are going to you and saying, listen, don't develop nuclear weapons. Don't develop nuclear weapons, South Korea. Don't develop nuclear weapons, Japan. Don't develop nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia. We will protect you. We will watch out for you. What kind of lesson do you think this instance sends to them? I think the message this is sending to many nations around the world is perhaps we can no longer count on the security promises made by the free world. Perhaps we need to start looking out for ourselves. And that's why the Ukrainian situation is so much more important than simply what's happening in Europe. This has implications around the world.
That's basically what he was saying barely 12 years ago. Such a righteous guy. Oh my God, I cannot recognize him. What happened to Mr. Marco Rubio? I have no idea. Look, there was a question. Not even a question, but like a commentary somewhere in the community post on my channel. Someone said that you can rely on Marco Rubio because Marco Rubio hates communists, right? Like his parents fled from Cuba and stuff like that, and he has a grudge, all right, against the communists, and of course he has a grudge against Russia. Correct me if I'm wrong. Marco Rubio is actually grateful, all right? He's grateful because his parents had a chance to flee, and basically he was raised in the United States. Hooray! Like, I mean, I don't really see Marco Rubio going to Cuba anytime, after Cuba becomes the most democratic country in the world. I don't really think that he plans to return to his motherland and settle. No, why? He's an American citizen. He has all the privilege of being raised in the United States and to be an American citizen. Am I wrong?
No. It's like, no. I mean, I don't understand how he's got to this point. I mean, he's sold his soul to the devil. I mean, look at Vance. Vance was the same thing about Trump, and look at him now. He's VP and, Trump can't do anything wrong. So, like you said earlier, if you make mistakes and you're not liked, suddenly you get promoted. I mean, it's like you ruffle a few feathers and then suddenly you're in a hot spot and you're, the foreign minister or you're the vice president or, so foreign secretary. So Trump's regime is, he's a coward, Trump, at the end of the day. There's nothing strong about the man at all. I mean, it's, excuse me, he's very much not, he portrays himself, but you only have to look at his recent social media posts to see how insecure the man is. He bigs himself up every time. I solved 9 wars. Well, one of them in Cambodia and Thailand's now kicking off again. And those are not wars, they're border disputes. And, he's constantly trying to sell himself like he's been told all his life he's a failure. So, there's definitely an insecure side to Trump. Whether that's not to do with the fact that somebody might have compromise on him, I don't know. I mean, it's a guess. I mean, he's put himself in these positions. We're now talking about Epstein. We're now talking about him being Russian. Technically, he's put himself in that position. If he was a good, honest person who made a good living doing what he was doing and became the president of the United States off the back of some good morals, then we wouldn't be having this conversation now, would we? So whether, there's no smoke without fire. So, at the moment, these are all allegations, but, at some point, we're gonna know what happened in the future at some point. He can't hide and delay it and shimmy away from it forever. At some point, somebody's gonna call him out on it, and I think we're probably very close to that right now. We could be seeing some action soon. So, Ukraine has to keep doing what Ukraine does. As I said to you last night, it's going to be Ukrainians that really look after Ukraine. It's sad to say, but you can't rely upon Europe, and it's not just about America bashing. We can't rely upon Europe either. We're going through some issues too. So it's going to be about, I've always said, what Ukraine domestically produces, what support it can get, but ultimately it's going to be Ukraine that saves Ukraine. And they're doing an amazing job considering, Russians attacking Ukraine with a coalition. It's people forget it's Ukraine fighting China, Iran, North Korea. Now you've got Indian workforce coming into Russia to supply workforce to help make ammunition and cover the shortfall in Russia for their war in Ukraine. Russia's openly said that. So now we're looking at India, China, Iran, Belarus, and it's still Ukraine essentially, because America's not supplying weapons and Europe's doing the best it can to buy these weapons and bring them in. So, Ukraine's doing an amazing job. And eventually that pressure is going to mount on Putin, because he's never been under this much pressure at all, ever. Tomahawks would have been amazing. I don't think it would have been any more than a handful, but they would have given Putin consequence, which I always said that's something he hasn't had in 20, 30 years. If you're going to hit our power structure, we're going to hit yours, but with more precision. So, they wouldn't have changed the battlefield so much, but they would have given Putin and Russia something to think about. So I'm absolutely positive that, at some point Putin's going to crack, and Zelensky's doing well to manage the problems he's got. Whatever you might think about him, he's definitely managing the problems he's got. He's exceptionally good at the public relations. He's exceptionally good at holding back Trump, not just Russia, but Trump as well, and the Americans. And he's, for me this week, he threw a political bomb into the mix where he just threw back at Russia. If you want elections, we'll have elections. No problems at all. But how are we going to do it? What we're going to do? Let's get it on. And now Russia's going, well, actually, we don't know if we want the elections now because we can't control it. And that's what it's all down to. These elections that Russia and Trump's been calling for elections because Russia's been calling for them. Now Zelensky said, okay, we'll have them, but how are we going to do it? We need this, we need this, we need this. And now it's like Russia's like, well, we can't control that. So we don't particularly want the elections. Now it's 50-50 whether that's going to come off. So, he's been exceptionally good at fighting Russia their own game. And whatever you might think about him, I don't think you would have probably had, my personal opinions, you probably wouldn't have had the same leader internationally with someone like Poroshenko, who did amazing stuff for the military when he was, the premier and prime minister and president, and he did so much for the military when I was in. He brought better standards, better food. He understood the threat coming from Russia. I can't take that away, but I don't think he my honest opinion, he would have the same charisma as Zelensky had. And that video he did on the opening days of the invasion, where he said, I don't want to tax it, we're here, you're here, we want to fight. I think that's probably one of the most iconic clips you'll ever see this, in the next 50 years. I don't know whether you're going to see anything quite like that again. I don't need a taxi, I need ammunition. So, you can't take that away. And as a soldier, you want to fight for leaders like that. Whatever you might think of Yermak, he still stayed. At the end of the day, the laws and the courts have got to decide where they go with it, and that's got to go where it's got to go. But at the end of the day, he stayed. He didn't run. They were all staying here fighting. So we've got to remember that in the grand concept and the grand scheme of things.
I agree with you. Speaking of, we will talk about Trump. I just want to briefly return to Marco Rubio and his story. We had this in Ukraine. You probably remember such Ukrainian political figure as Taras Chornovil.
Yeah.
So there was Vyacheslav Chornovil, one of the great leaders in Ukraine early 90s, right? The one who ran for the presidency and stuff. And he was murdered, basically, that stage car crash and stuff like that. Already early 90s in Ukraine, we had a figure that could become one of the most democratic, one of the most successful people. Basically, he was like, I don't know how to compare him, whom to compare him to, like Lech Walesa in Poland, something like that. Unfortunately, he died. He didn't become a president, but Vyacheslav Chernovil was politically repressed. He spent decades behind bars in Russian gulags, right, all over the Soviet Union. And when he got released, when we had already the independent Ukraine and we had freedom and stuff like that, he was later murdered in that staged car crash. His son, Taras Chernovil, became a member of parliament, and he joined the pro-Russian forces in the parliament. And everyone was like, what? Why? Why are you doing that? And he was, like this very unpleasant person. He would always smoke, scratch his nose, during interviews. Like he was, I don't know, behaving strange, maybe because of some substances. I don't know what he smoked. Anyways, but he was radically pro-Russian, all right? He was radically supporting the pro-Russian forces. I understand that it was done because of, first of all, money don't smell. And secondly, the pro-Russian forces that were ruling Ukraine, they also needed somebody people with the background, people with, like him, people with great parents, all right? Like Vyacheslav Chernovil. So Taras Chernovil was supporting pro-Russian forces, even though his father was basically, he could be like President Zelensky nowadays, all right? The same level. And I was still a tiny kid back then. I was like 10 years old. But I'm like, what the fuck is his problem? Why? Why is he supporting the pro-Russian forces? His father was like Ukrainian patriot. He was democratic person with open mind and stuff. Why? And then I realized why. It's because in the Soviet Union, where he grew up, all right, the son of the Vyacheslav Chernovil, where he grew up as a public enemy. He grew up as an outcast because his father was a prisoner. His father was politically repressed. His father was considered the enemy of the Soviet Union. And basically, he couldn't have proper childhood. He would be, shunned, and he would be cursed, and everybody despised him because his father wasn't in the Communist Party. His father was doing his time in Gulag, basically. And Taras Chernovil actually hated his father for that. He hated his father because instead of being like everyone else, joining Communist Party and I don't know, he chose the path of sacrifice for Ukraine, country that was occupied by the Russian communists for 70 years, and his son also suffered because of that. That is why he hated him. And basically, this story can be applied to Rubio in a way that Rubio, even though he lost his motherland, his parents ran to the United States and stuff like that, but this challenge and this tragedy actually gave him a very, very good push. It gave him this blessed opportunity to be an American citizen. So that is he should thank Putin and Stalin and everyone else for that he's saluting American flag every morning instead of the Cuban. That's just the reality. That's just from life. But what I wanted to talk about, remember, my dear viewers, several days ago on the stream, we talked about the 82% of Ukrainians that allegedly want the peace deal to be done. All right, that's according to President Trump. President Trump said that 82% according to the recent polls. So I have recent polls for you, my dear friends. All right, those polls look like this. I will enlarge this for you. So according to the most recent polls, and this is an actual one, this one conducted literally last week in Ukraine, all right, by the Ukrainian statistics agency. According to this one, as of today, not 82, not even 50, but 38% of Ukrainians consider, in order to achieve peace as soon as possible and preserve independence, consider that Ukraine may give up some of its territories. 54% Ukrainians, which is, by the way, more than in June 25, May-June 25, 54% Ukrainians say that under no circumstances should Ukraine give up any of its territories. 8% of people basically say that it's hard to decide something like that. But that's the most recent poll. Guys, in February-March 2025, actually 39% of Ukrainians considered that probably it's a good idea to give up territory. This number shrank over the months until the end of the year, and now it's 38. So again, you can see that Ukrainian position is dynamic, all right? Dynamic in the way that we can change our opinion based on what is happening. Yes, early in the beginning of the year, we trusted the American president. We trusted that he can do something. Later, we realized that he can do basically nothing, and that is why still more people believe that under no circumstances should Ukraine give up its territory. That's like actual figures that are available. And the question is, where did those numbers, those like 82% Ukrainians dreaming of literally giving up their homes, giving up the places they grew up at and things like that to the Russian terrorists, where do those numbers come from, all right? Declared by President Donald Trump. So I have two versions. Either they come directly from Russians, which is possible, or they are written by the same author who said that basically, I don't know, Haitians eat their dogs and cats. Maybe. I cannot forget about this one. You don't have mic. Your mic, it's off, I think. Yeah, so you gotta turn it on. Still nothing. Still nothing. No sounds. It happens all the time, don't worry. I mean, it's my channel. We have all sorts of technical fuck-ups here, like every single time. Okay, friends, let's give Shaun some time to fix it, because I literally don't. Yeah, sure, no problem. In the meantime, let's check out some news, because again, in the title, it said that 2 Russian tankers got smoked. All right, so first of all, not only Russian tankers got smoked, also Orsk, Russian city of Orsk. Oh my God. We call them orcs for a reason. Russian city of Orsk was also receiving the symmetric response from Ukraine yesterday. We can see that tremendous freaking mushroom. I mean, it looks absolutely terrifying. Yeah, the dude says that something is burning big time. And besides that is Yaroslavl. Ukrainian drones attacked the Russian oil refinery in Yaroslavl, and also it is reported that the Russian AN-26 was also hit. Shaun, can you say something to us?
I can hear you.
All right, we can hear you as well. Welcome back.
I've got you on a different camera now, so yeah, so we're sort of we're sorted now. My battery had gone, unfortunately, but we're there. Can you see me okay?
Yeah. See, well,
It's not as good, unfortunately, but yeah,
it's fine. It's fine. Come on.
that's good. No,
Um,
I don't know. I'll listen to you. I don't know where you got up to.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a bit about the recent strikes on the Russian oil tankers because it was reported that Ukrainian Special Operation Forces, together with the rebels called the Black Spark, attacked two Russian Shadow Fleet tankers that were carrying different military supplies, different military equipment, not far from the Kalmykia Republic in the Caspian Sea. Guys, Caspian Sea is fucking half a world away, but no one in the terrorist federation is safe nowadays, as it turns out. We know that two Russian ships called Compositor Rachmaninov and Askar Sarija that Russia is using militarily and were sanctioned by the United States and also participated in delivering different military supplies between Iran and terrorist federation, got smoked by the special forces of Ukraine. Also, besides that, you can see some additional footage coming from Yaroslavl, Slavneft Yanas, that is the name for the Russian oil refinery. According to different statistics, in November alone, Ukrainian drones decreased the Russian oil producing and processing capacity by 10%. I mean, in November alone, all right? So we already know that Ukraine almost halved the Russian oil capacity, and 10% of that was achieved in November. So what else? We have another statement from Donald Trump who says that Zelensky is the only person who doesn't support the peace plan. He said that I thought that we were very, very close to making this peace deal with Russia. Very close to this peace deal with Ukraine, but turns out that everyone besides President Zelensky likes the concept of peace deal. So there are proposals for the peace deal made in 2025 by the United States. In March, May, July, two in July, actually, in October, in November, that were all accepted by Ukraine, rejected by the terrorist Russian Federation, as we remember. But for some reason, turns out that I don't know. Donald Trump considers that only President Zelensky doesn't want the peace deal. Of course, if the peace deal, if the peace deal, Trump peace dealovich, holy fuck!
I'm gonna try and explain that to people. I don't know if I can explain.
Please do.
No, I can't. It's a bad. Anything that starts with business generally a bad word. So I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to.
Yeah, so basically the only peace deal that Trump recognizes is basically Ukraine capitulating, and that is something we should all understand, I think, because Ukraine, again, Shaun, as you said, you want unconditional ceasefire, please. Let's stop shooting. Ukrainians agree. We don't want shooting, guys. We don't want war. We never wanted war.
No. We don't want war. Let me get a better angle. Yeah, we don't want war. I mean, it's like we've said all the way along that we don't. We didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for my house to be stolen, my life to be turned upside down, and my community to be killed and imprisoned. And what essentially is what I said last night. I've had to use words like Nazi filtration camps just to get people interested, And essentially, that's what it was. I was like I was starved for 60 days. I came out looking like I'd been in a Japanese war camp and I weighed 60 kilos when I came out. My average weight is about 84 kilos. I'm probably slightly over now, but 86 kilos probably is my normal weight. So I literally, it's really hard to stomach where you see Trump just totally pushing on Ukraine just to get a peace deal, which essentially is for a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, it's nothing more than that. It's a quick, fast peace plan. And when I said in February, it looks like the Trump administration doesn't know the region, doesn't know the language, doesn't know culture, doesn't know the origins of the war. It turns out now, if you fast forward 7 months, it's not about that. It's about they know perfectly well. This seems to be a private financial deal with the Trump administration. It doesn't look anything like you don't understand, you're misinterpreting the situation, you're green and naive. I think we're past that stage now. I think it's got to the point where we're now accusing the Trump administration of doing dirty deals, pulling the rug out. How long have they been doing this for? I would say Trump was stopping the weapons coming into Ukraine before he was president for nearly a year, that when we didn't know we would survive that summer. I know with that we were in a far position then than we are now. So I honestly believe we're past that stage of just being nice pleasantries and it's just Trump. I think we're now got to the point where some red lines have to be drawn, and you can hear Rutte today saying things like, I think we're going to have to prepare for a war. Everybody knows that if Trump wins in Ukraine, he isn't going to stop. If Putin, slip of the tongue.
I do it all the time for some reason. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a slip of the tongue there, Trump, Putin. I don't know, but if he does win in Ukraine, Putin's not going to stop. He's going to go straight into those grey areas like Moldova. He's going to unsettle those. He's going to join up with Transnistria, and then it's straight into Poland's his next game. Anybody telling you he's not going to go and push on, he's already doing it now. So he's already pushing into European countries and the UK now. So when it comes to, if he does win in Ukraine, you won't see me again. Probably won't see you again. We'll go missing. He's got from the border of Ukraine 6 hours by car to Germany, and that's less reaction time to missiles that he's going to bring into Ukraine, especially ballistics onto NATO and into Europe. So, and we haven't even touched on nuclear capabilities yet, if they're working. I mean, he's having some real problems with intercontinental ballistic missiles, if you look at the news and the training area results. But it's only a matter of time before he solves those. So, eventually, if he succeeds in Ukraine, it's going to bring a whole new world of problems on for NATO. And we're not talking billions anymore. We're talking trillions. This is going to be, because all those battlefield innovations that you've seen in Ukraine that are fighting the Russians will then be Russian, and it puts them at one of the most experienced armies on the planet, in modern day warfare. So, it's a big thing. If Ukraine loses, it's gonna escalate more. And if he's got that, is he really going to stop? No. Personally, having fought the Russians, I think, NATO would crush the Russians, to be honest. I honestly believe that. Having served with the NATO for so many years and trained with NATO, and then having fought the Russians here in Ukraine, I have no doubt that NATO would win. Whether they've got enough armaments and ordnance and missiles and artilleries, I have no idea. They may do well for 2 weeks, then run out of rockets. It's that sort of scenario we're looking at, because the situation in Ukraine has got everybody thinking about their own personal supplies, because it's taken up a lot of resources within NATO. Same in the Russian side. North Korea, if you read the reports, North Korea's exhausted. It's taken all their crap ammunition. Now it's scratching around for others, and even their ballistics are hand to mouth at the moment. So they've not got the stockpiles there, and now they're world famous stockpiles of tanks and artillery pieces have been shot to bits in this war. So Russia's not in a position, I don't think, to really set up a second front against NATO. However, Putin's really good at testing the boundaries and Article 5 and sending in drones and sabotage teams. And they've already blown up the railway tracks into Ukraine in Poland. So I don't think that's going to stop. I think the internet's made a few new problems in the access and the ability to recruit people for money. You know, the dregs of humanity, drug dealers, gang criminal warlords, and whatever, you know, alcoholics. And so I think we're at that point now where you know, it is really turning into a world war where propaganda is now turning into Russia, one of Russia's main weapons, because it's exhausting itself militarily.
I agree on that. I wanted to talk a bit about you and your experience, all right? Because there are several pictures that I like to share. Yesterday, I mentioned my close friend who was captured by Russians early in 2022. And here, for example, that's us in the Svetlodarsk Bulge, I believe 2018, 2017. Around 2017, 2018. So that's on the right is my friend. And that is him after he returned from the captivity. So, yeah, and like you were saying about the starvation there, like the way they tortured people in the prisons. But this is us literally several months after that. So you can see like his story is very, very much like yours, because Bogdan started eating like crazy. And of course, our amazing community also helped him big time, because I started this campaign called Feed Bogdan, all right? And our dear viewers and family started literally helping him get bulkier, all right? So he got bulky very, very fast. He started working out immediately after he returned. What can you tell about the food in prison? Because Bogdan told me that basically it's like, in his case, it was water mixed with a bit of milk, several pieces of rice floating there, and basically that's it. And at one point he even had to fight with a fucking prison dog to take its bread, all right? And like it's a fucked up story.
I can believe it. I laugh because it's gallows humor, and we, you know, that's one of the big things that got me through. But I laugh because, you know, initially, essentially, when we was at the black site, we called it the black site because we didn't know where it was. It was underground. And I spent 60 days underground in a 1 meter by 3 meter cell that had the light on 24 hours a day, and rotated like a death metal on a loop. So you couldn't hear the torture that was going on, or the screams, or artillery coming in from the Ukrainians, or bombs. So we had that. And then we had a buzzer to put us to bed and a buzzer to wake us up. Nobody tells you the rules, so you just get beaten up as like a work in progress. And then you have a hood on all the time when somebody comes in, so you can't identify them. And then for food, I mean, in the mornings for the first 60 days, I was lucky enough to get, if I was lucky, I would get bread about 9 o'clock in the morning. If I was pulled out for propaganda before that, which was quite often in those early days, I wouldn't get any bread at all until the next following 9 o'clock in the morning. So the longest I went was for 3 days without food in captivity, 3 or 4 days without food. So I was inevitably asking the media I was forced in front of if they could get me some food, because I wasn't eating. They wouldn't give me any food. And it got to the point where I just said it outright. You know, I didn't hide it anymore. I was just like, guys, could you, if you want me to, give me a cigarette and some water and give me some food, because I'm not going to talk to you otherwise, because I'm not being fed. And they were like, you're not being fed. And suddenly a Don Mac burger would be thrust into my face in front of a camera saying, here you go, look, we feed our prisoners. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to get such a beating for this when I get back. But generally, I was then haggling with the news presenters to give me something to survive, because we just weren't eating. And those were the really tough times. But by the time I'd got to the trial, I was captured on April the 13th, and then I was in trial around the 9th of June. And then by the time I got to trial, I was emaciated. If you look at the pictures of when I was captured to when I went to trial, It looked like I'd been starved for 3 months. I was gaunt. My back went into my legs. You could see my ribs. My elbows started to protrude, get bigger because I wasn't eating, and all the fat was being drained from my forearms. I was then suffering with blood pressure problems because we weren't getting any water. We had technical water. We were drinking from like some sort of well which tasted of gasoline, and which then give you dysentery. So you're battling two elements. Then you're no food, and then you're just going to the toilet and you're battling dysentery and then throwing up. So by the time I got to trial, they were like, "Oh, he looks really bad," and that was all of us. We all looked terrible. So we had, I would say, bread every other day for near on 60 days, and then when I was transferred to Makivka, the food got a little bit better, but it was still only a bit of porridge kasha, which is like, for those that don't know, it's like porridge. But it was made in that dodgy water we drank. So you just go through rotations of dysentery because it was cooked in the foul, stenchy water. And then they would tell us that it was our fault because the Ukrainians had blocked the canal. So it was like, and they weren't getting any water. So it was our fault that we were eating crap water in a prison cell inside Ukraine where we'd been, taken after the invasion. So, I mean, everything was always our fault. It was our fault that we weren't getting fed it. When we did get fed, it was our fault that it was shit water that it was cooked in. And then essentially, after we got occasionally a bit of fish, but nothing much. That was about it for several months. It was if you've ever wanted to lose weight, I can give you a good diet plan because that was just crazy. It was just I couldn't believe people treated people like that.
That's so fucked up. Oh my God. Another question. Have you ever, while you were there, all right, while you were in the Russian captivity, have you ever seen the representatives of International Red Cross visiting you?
No, none. There was no humanitarian aid. We weren't considered prisoners of war, even though I'd signed a contract with the Ukrainian military and was entitled to the rights as a prisoner of war. They just ignored that. So there was no humanitarian aid. We actually, one of the guys got a parcel delivered in, so we were able to barter some things to get just a toothbrush and toothpaste. And the medical side of it was very bad. As in any prison, not just theirs. You can't just walk out and go to the doctors. But this was extremely bad because we had dysentery. Paul Yuri was one of the British NGO worker who was captured in by the Russians in Zaporizhia, I think, and he was murdered in prison, beaten and killed. The prosecutors died of his injuries 2 days later. So, you didn't want to get injured in an environment like that because the medical facilities were exceptionally bad. And RT and the propaganda just wouldn't listen to any of that side of it. They were so when they broadcast on Paul Yuri's death, they broadcast him and portrayed him as a terrorist in Donetsk People's Republic, a Nazi, and he was a charity worker, an NGO worker from the UK who just came to help people and evacuate people from those conflict zones. So he wasn't even military. So it's really difficult to swallow the Russian narrative on that. So I mean, that pushed me, as I said last night, that pushed me into writing the book and doing what I do now in journalism and media to really tell the story of what it's like living next door to Russia. It's not just sort of Ukraine's problem now. I think there's a lot of Westerners that come here and South Americans, and this is growing. This is getting bigger. There's a lot of us now that have lost homes, and we're not Russia-phobic. Our decision to hate Russia is basically on life experience. I don't think we're Russia-phobic enough. It's that sort of, how far do you want me to be? They tortured, killed my friend, stole my home, give me the death penalty, sanctioned me so I can't go back and get that, and my family. And they've done that to many people in Ukraine, and largely all because I'm a Brit. So it's maybe even more want to now fight to get my home back, and my because part of me is a character flaw in me is that I hate losing, even if I play tiddlywinks and children's games with my nieces. I've always got to win, So I hate losing. So part of me is that character flaw in me where I just quite resilient and I just want to get my stuff back, and my home back, and I don't want to lose. So part of me keeps going.
Absolutely. My guys from my brigade after the HOSTOMEL battle saw several conscripts that were in our supply battalion that were captured actually during that battle. And within 1 month at max, I think, within 1 month, they were exchanged. They're conscripts, they were not even contract soldiers. And they were so depressed because they say, of course, they were beaten up, very, very hard there, just for fun, but they were depressed because Russians made them record the propagandist videos, and actually they showed some of the videos. I believe they're still somewhere there on the YouTube of our guys actually saying, yes, we are Nazi and we didn't have anything from our command. Our command was so bad and they don't like us, they don't respect us and things like that. And they were so depressed because of that. Our officers are sitting there, they go dude, relax, you did the right thing, all right? What you said, what they told you to say, it was okay because you're here, you survived. And what I wanted to ask you is, you said that you had this resistance training, right? One of our officers, one of my good friends, also had such a training. He didn't tell much details about this. I tried to ask him. He said that, yeah, we had a training, but it was based on the Omega in the National Guard. The special force guys, they're full of mysteries. And that is why he didn't say much details, but he said that, yeah, we had such training, and I would like to know more about that because he didn't explain, and basically I don't know much about this.
Well, let's start chronologically, really. The first point of capture is generally the most dangerous. So you've got to start with the fact that if you get through that first initial capture, then things are going to get a little bit more easier. When, I can't tell you, it depends. But generally, you're more at risk of dying at that initial capture than you are at any point through your captivity. One, because unpredictability is your really major concern, and you don't know if somebody just you killed a couple of your captor's friends, so you don't know if he's just going to come in and shoot you. So, and that's the realism of it. I was electrocuted, stabbed in the leg, beaten right at my initial capture, where I thought a mock execution was done on me. So at that point, I thought, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. There's not much you can't train for pain, but you certainly know the stages of resistance and capture. So you know that if you get through this, you've got to just get through it. And that helped me no end, because I knew at some point if I was considered as somebody of interest, then essentially they would move me to the guy who would now be my friend. So you get good cop, bad cop, or bad cop, even worse cop. So you're literally being taken from your initial point of capture to then an interrogator. So essentially, and then I had some added bonuses. I'd lived in Ukraine, I understood Russian, I understood I was being moved. It wasn't a shock. I'd been surrounded for 7 weeks. So actually, Mariupol was a lot harder to deal with than the actual prison time and the capture, only because I didn't expect to get through Mariupol, let alone be captured. So on that basis, I was then taken to an interrogator who then told me as long as I did what I was told, I wouldn't find too much of a problem. But that's when your training really sort of kicks in, because at some point you're going to have to give them something. You can't not give them something, but you don't want to shit on your mates. And there's a saying that really you take with you is that you really don't want to crap on your mates. So you've got to come home with honor, I think the Americans call it. For me, I wanted to get through this whole scenario knowing I'd done a good job. So it's about holding your head up when you come back, because you've got to have a long time living with yourself. So you've got to give them some things without shitting on your mates. For me, it wasn't too bad. I became very political, very grey. I tried to be the most boringest person I could on camera. I'd had experience of giving interviews under camera, not just during my resistance training, but also just doing media before the invasion. So I understood what I needed to say and when to say it. I also understood a bit about the culture because I'd lived in Ukraine, and especially in Donbass and Donetsk Oblast for several years before the full-scale invasion. So I knew what to say, when to say it. And that gave me a leg up. I think it's a lot to do with how I survived through that initial capture, that I was able to sort of communicate a bit. Because if you don't understand the word sit down, that's enough to get you a broken rib and can get you killed, because there's no medical facility, or you don't know how that's going to be later on. So even if you don't understand the word, stepinki, or, step in Russian, and you can end up getting really injured really badly. So I was, pretty lucky in that respect that I had a good grounding for 2 or 3 years in Ukraine before I was captured in Mariupol. And Mariupol was my fourth rotation. So it wasn't like it was all new to me. I'd lived there for a significant amount of time. And then pretty much the propaganda is one of the hardest things you deal with, because you have to be very political. And then when the trial came about, you just know that that's just rigged and the decision's already made. Nobody's come and talked to you in prison. Your defensive lawyer you're told you're going to have is turned from a man to a lady you've never even met. Nobody's interviewed you for your statements, your contracts, your side of the story. And suddenly you're thrown into a court where you're given no defense whatsoever and told that when you say not guilty, you're told you can't say not guilty. You have to, if you're going to go home, you have to accept your what you did, which means there's not a trial. It's just a kangaroo court, essentially. So there wasn't much I could really do about it. I was having sort of, there's two elements to being in capture: self-induced pressure and system-induced pressure. The self-induced pressure can be far worse than the system-induced pressure, because you put problems on yourself when it all goes quiet. When you've got the death penalty and you're left in a cell 23 hours a day or 24 hours a day to stew on your own thoughts, that can have a real detrimental effect on you, more so than physical harm and a few love taps, beating, and maybe starvation. It can have more of a detrimental. It'll send you down that rocky road of losing hope. And if you lose hope, you really have lost everything. So it's essentially you've got to keep your brain active in doing things, and keep motivated and keep pushing on for the things you love and your wife and your family. You want to get home. And, my friend was released this Easter. You said about your friend. I met my friend who I was in the cell with in the black site, who was released at Easter. And we had a big celebration, Oh, by the way, I was in Svetlodarsk in 2018 and Bakhmut and around that area in 2008. So we might have crossed over at some point.
Could be, absolutely. And Bogdan, by the way, told me the same. He said that you gotta keep your hope, and he said that my hope was that I want to finally walk with my son in the park holding hands. He said that is something that kept me running, and he said some things that actually helped him. For example, was that there were a lot of guys. Some were specialists in fishing, some were specialists in building, construction building and stuff like that. Some were specialists in collecting mushrooms, and they all shared that experience, So Bogdan now knows.
We did. Yeah, my colleague was he had a pig and a farm and a small holding out in the sticks, and he told me how to make cheese in the cell and how to kill a pig right and make sausages and ribs. I mean, it was amazing when you don't get any food how that keeps you going. And I was telling about my past. You had to be really careful in prison because they used to interrogate the people. When I used to go and do propaganda, they would interrogate the people in my cell to see what I told them. So we had to be very careful about giving information. But as far as like that sort of stuff, shit talk. We talked all the time. It just keep you going, and what we were going to do, what we were going to eat when we first got out, and but I mean, initially we didn't even know there was a Ukraine at the start, so we had to keep motivated. I thought, how am I going to get out of this? If Ukraine's gone, how am I going to get out of Russia? It's like Britain doesn't deal with terrorists. So again, these self-induced pressures, you can put a lot of pressure on yourself and not realize, and then suddenly you realize the Moscow has sunk, or Ukraine's fighting back, and suddenly it's not been all taken. There is a Ukraine. And so you can put a lot of pressure on yourself, self-induced pressures that if you're not careful, you could go down a slippery road when actually there is still hope, So you've got to balance that and manage to mitigate that to a degree. But yeah, exactly what your friend went through, we went through as well. I mean, we had so much. I know more about the guys I was in prison with than probably my own wife. Because I'd lived, eaten shit, talked. You can't not talk because you're in the same room with them, and it's like 1 meter by 3 meter. It's tiny. So it really is. I mean, it gives you a lesson in what you can really get through and what you can deal with. I certainly, as I said to you last night, look at things slightly different now. I live for each day, and I'm always thinking, well, it could be worse. It's like. You sort of look at things a bit like that now. It's definitely made me stronger. I've used that bad experience as a catalyst, a positive thing to drive me into my next job and what I do now. So I'm not going to be beaten by Russia ever. It depends. Not everybody is as fortunate as me to have a very good family and support network, and so it comes with a lot of things, and I'm grateful for that. And I certainly look at that now. My amazing friends who, like you, who helped Bogdan to once he got out. I had such amazing friends who helped me. One of my friends even bought me Russian vodka when I got back to the UK. Said, I bought you a present. I was like, no, I've had enough of Russia, to be honest. But that's the sort of friends I've got. It's like ripping a Band-Aid. They would take the piss out of me quite a bit, and but that's what you want in friends, to support you through.
Yeah. When Bogdan, we talked about it when Bogdan was released, and I met him. I literally early in the morning, all of a sudden, he calls me from like unknown phone number, and he says, "Dude, like, how are you? Do you want to meet? I'm in Kiev." I'm like, "Who the fuck is that?" He's like, "It's me, Bogdan." I'm fucking jumping from my bed because, like, the last message I have from him is that we are being captured. Goodbye. Like,
Yeah, I'd said the same sort of thing to my wife. Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, I was like, it's all over now. I don't know where we're going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. I said, she was like, you need to get home. Tell the boys they're fighting like warriors. You put Mariupol on the map. And she started screaming at me down the phone. And I thought she was going to cry, but she just really went full Ukrainian on me and just told me, get a grip of yourself and, you're going to get home. And I was like, my friend sort of, Dima, unfortunately, he died in Mariupol. He came around and said, how'd the call go? And I went, I think okay. I was totally blown away by it. You just keep fighting and get home. So, yeah, I have made those calls. I mean, it's like crazy.
Yeah. uh, regarding the propaganda. So he's in Kiev. I met him in the hospital, and he's like, "Okay, I'm ready to listen." He takes a pack of cigarettes. It's like, I'm ready to listen. Not me like listening to him, what he went through. He's like, I'm ready to listen. And I start telling him what was happening in Ukraine all these months. He's like sitting there smoking, shaking his head like, holy fuck. Seriously. Like they were exposed to all that bullshit that you were exposed to as well for like 7 months. And he said, like, I had no idea, like, if there's still Ukraine, like, if the people I know are still alive, like, shit. And then I got exchanged all of a sudden. Nobody told us. Like, it was a surprise.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, and then we spent, I don't know, I was telling him the whole storyline until it was like midnight probably. I don't know, spent several hours, and he was like, I had no idea. I had no idea, because they were captured on the very, very first day in Chernobyl area. And yeah, and his armored truck, the Cossack truck that they were riding, well, maybe not really his, but one of those. So it was the one that was brought to Kadyrov after a while, after approximately a month of being stored in the Kaponier in the Red Forest. So it radiates good energy, there in Grozny somewhere.
Yeah. That's exactly. I mean, it sounds identical, to be honest. I was telling my friend in Easter when he did 3 years. He took one look at me and he went, "Oh, Shaun's," because they call me Stary Sobaka, because that's my nickname. So Stary Pest, like that. So he went, "Oh, Stary Sobaka." He said it means old dog to those that don't know. And he says, "Old dog." He says, "You look like you've put on a bit of weight." And I said, "Well, I haven't been in Russian captivity for 3 years." And he's like, and I was going, "So a lot's changed." He said, "What's changed?" I said, "Well, America's not the good guys anymore." And he went, "Really?" And I said, I was trying to explain about Trump and how he came in, just jokingly, it's like, just having these sort of get-togethers about, what's happened over the last 3 years. And then you sit there and go, "I can't believe it's been in 3 years." And one of those years he was with me. So, it's like, you're trying to get people's lives back on track, and you're trying to tell them what's happening, because all of them want to know what's happened. They want to know what's really gone on. So you say, "Well, actually, we went into Kursk and took some." Really? Like, yeah, we went into Kursk and everything. So I didn't know any of that. Of course, you might not know any of that, but but I mean, some of the news was pretty good with us. I mean, we had to take things with a pinch of salt. We had to work out if the Russians were saying things were bad, it was obviously far worse than they were telling us. So, and then we had to sort of make a sort of percentage split. If the Ukrainians, if it was bad, it was going to be, if Russians were saying it was 20-30%, it was going to be 60% bad for them to even mention it. So, we would look at that and look at the maps and hear the radio broadcast sometimes and get an idea of what was going on and how close. But even as I said earlier, the prisoners, the general population, were complaining about really the lack of information and how the news was lying to them. And they knew it. The Russians knew it. They knew that they weren't being told the whole truth. They just carried on and got on with it. It was a joke, some of the stuff. Especially when you look back now and they're talking about hitting 3 or 4 Abrams tanks and they hadn't even reached the country. I mean, it was balmy. So, it's like that old adage, how many Zelenskys did you kill today? How many Death Stars did you kill today? I mean, that is literally, Russia hasn't moved on from the 40s. Statue of Liberty is kaput. Some elements of Russia hasn't moved very far at all. And it still does it, but it does it effectively on social media, and platforms like X. It does it exceptionally well. Just floods the information space with dodgy news, and then pays a few top propagandists to spin that news even further. So I think we're in a better position now to see that. I think more people are starting to realize what's really true and what's not. And I just what really falls into free speech and propaganda. I mean, Jeffrey Sachs is pushing this to the bar. I mean, he's on Russian state TV saying one thing, and these are the guys that were torturing us. And he's pushing a Russian agenda, and then he's on Western media pushing the Russian agenda. I mean, this is not now free speech. This looks incredibly like, Russian propaganda. And is he being paid for it? But he's on every channel, because he's a professor. So, it just begs the question. Now I'm an advocate I'm an advocate of free speech, but is some stuff really free? Alex Jones is definitely not portraying free speech if he's got the Russian warlord on there. What's his name? I can't remember his name now. But he was on Alex Jones's show recently, and and he was sentenced for attacking Americans. When you start putting on criminals like that onto your program, and you're really diluting the truth somewhat, especially ones that were killing Americans. So, I think the world's slightly mixed with its free speech. There's certainly not free speech at all. Graham Phillips, the UK propagandist, definitely not free speech, especially if you're feeding dead Ukrainian soldiers to pigs. I mean, that you can't then go, oh, well, that's free speech. No, that's just wrong. That's just demented. You've got no morals, and clearly you're lacking any ethics. So, straight away, you can't call yourself a journalist if you're doing stuff like that. You just discredit yourself, and you're certainly pushing people towards the Ukrainian side if you do that. So I think there's a big argument now about free speech. Certainly, JD Vance is picking on the UK and Europe, and personally from the UK, I don't think we really have a massive problem with free speech. I think that's projected by Russia and projected by JD Vance, and essentially we know the difference between free speech and propaganda. I mean, that's the difference. I think I don't think we do have a real problem with free speech in the UK. So, and Ukraine's got its problems with that, but half of that is fundamentally pushed by the Russians. From what I see, a lot of it is pushed by the Russians. I think if you invade a country, commit genocide, for which it's all intents and purposes they're doing, and steal the children, you can't then claim free speech, which is just balmy. It doesn't make any sort of sense. You could kill a whole, destroy Mariupol, and slaughter 25,000 predominantly Russian speakers, and then anybody challenges that, you're going, oh well, free speech. I'm allowed an opinion. This is our opinion. No, that's propaganda. That's justifying, your actions and your murder and your genocide. That's not free speech. So I think the world's going through this issue at the moment. And we're sort of again, we commentate on that quite a bit, yourself included.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a dilemma, right? Right. We all have right to speak freely, but do bots have right to speak freely? Because on one hand, of course, like bots kind of represent a living person, but on the other hand, like they are, for example, AI powered. So do fake accounts that were born like yesterday, all right, do they have right to free speak if they're not even human beings? That's something
No, I don't think so. I think here you're looking at, if there's someone programming it to telling it what to think and project. So I think that's free speech well out of the equation there. I mean, you shouldn't really get, I always tell people, you shouldn't really get your news from social media anyway, but this is the world we live in, unfortunately. We live in a TikTok 5-second world where the young kids are getting their information from TikTok and X and tweets and friends telling them. They're not watching the news. They're not watching, impartial news with ethics and some sort of credible reporting, impartial. They're getting it from the Tate brothers. They're getting it from them. That's who's telling. I mean, to be honest, it was Axl Rose and Madonna who sort of taught me when I was growing up. It wasn't my mum and dad, or it certainly wasn't the news. But it's just multiplied and a multitude since social media's come out. It's made people more accessible and more, you can get into contact with them more. So they do have a hero. He can tell them pretty much anything they want, and the kids are more susceptible to this. So, China's got really good at that, and Russia's been really good at to do that. Whereas we've had a lot of protections on children in the West, So I think essentially, we've got a big problem with this. What is free speech and what is paid propaganda, and I think we've got a massive problem in this. The populist culture is a real problem at the moment, with the wrong people leading, criticizing the governments. When the Tate brothers start criticizing Ukraine and their governments in the UK and want to run for prime minister, that should get everybody thinking, hold on a minute, that's just wrong.
That's fucked up, let's be honest.
That's fucked up. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. It's just fucked up.
Yeah. What else I wanted to show you? Check this shit out. I'm not sure if you saw it. So basically that's a Russian drone and a Ukrainian soldier, right?
That's a good hit.
How crazy is that? Oh my god!
Do you know how hard it is to hit a drone with a rifle? It's exceptionally
I can
hard.
tell. I can tell.
For him to hit that is remarkable. I mean, I must have shot at lots of drones and not hit a thing. It's exceptionally hard. And then you have to fire automatic, and then you have the bunch of you firing automatic. As soon as probably better to hide from it rather than try and shoot it. Was my decision at the end of the day, because it's exceptionally hard, and that's quite an interesting video. I actually hit it.
Yeah. Do you know my drone story?
No.
Oh my god. I'll be short. Okay. So 2017, 2018 Svetlodarsk Bulge. Basically, I was a platoon sergeant in the National Guard. So we are going with my friend from place where we were connecting wires and stuff like that, because we ran out of proper wires, and we are going back to our observation position, and everything was dead on my position because obviously we had no electricity, all the radios died and everything else. And we are walking towards our observation point, and we can hear and later see the drone literally like flying over the top of the tree line. And it's kind of flying from the Russian territory, because we were on the bank of the Svetlodarsk Reservoir. And on the other side of it, there's Russians. Basically, it's 2017, 2018. And we can see and hear that drone. And my friend, he was like, very much into all those esoterics, Vedic culture, Buddhism, yada yada. He didn't eat meat. He was always enlightened. He was like, very, very calm and relaxed dude. And he looks at that and he says, "You think you can shoot it down?" I didn't even ask myself if I should, I'm like, of course I can. And because it kind of hangs on one spot, I take my rifle, literally 5 shots, it goes, and falls down. And he's like, and he smokes, and he's like, Nice shot. Maybe we should go and get like the card. But again, because it was 2017 actually. The drones were not that widespread. They were only used for reconnaissance, and of course, getting a drone and the card means that you're the dude, all right. And I'm like, oh, the card, all right. And we start running towards the crash site, and first thing we see is a bunch of very, very sad Ukrainian drone operators from the armed forces, not from the National Guard, but from the armed forces, collecting what remains from the drone. So basically, I shot down the only working drone in the 54th Brigade. And that is the reason why the drone operator, that young lady, was obviously very, very sad because of that. And after that, I myself literally became a meme in my brigade. My friend from the anti-air battalion actually had like my last name on his wall of honor, wall of shame, wall of fame, you know. Together with all the like different patches, there was my name, because I was the first dude in our brigade who
on
actually,
a kill board.
who actually shot down a flying object for the first time in history. And then we went to Yavoriv, I remember, with my guys, and so our brigade is there, lined up. You know, we have this mutual military exercise with our friends from NATO and stuff. And already then I was a press officer, so I was commissioned from NCO to CO basically, and I became a press officer already. So I was with the camera and I was like making pictures. And then some of the operators launch a drone to record all the ranks, all the boxes of the people there. And as soon as the drone starts buzzing, my whole brigade fucking starts laughing and screaming like, take away his gun, he's fucking crazy. Oh my god. So that was, yeah, but I admit, like, shooting down a drone is a really hard business, and especially if it's a tiny FPV fucking shit, because what I shot down personally was a big white Phantom 3, expensive as fuck. So that's absolutely, that's very, very hard. But on the other hand, like, I didn't try shooting them using shotguns. I know that a lot of our guys are using.
No.
Yeah,
because I mean, in 2022, it was a different war. I mean, it's not like it is now. I mean, drones in general were taking out, big bulky bits of equipment, artillery pieces, and vehicles. You know, they weren't taking out individuals like they are now. I mean, you could 12 of you could go out, 12 drones take you all out. You know, it's like there's a drone for every person that's coming into Ukraine at the moment. So it's a totally different war. And then you've got fiber optics, and now you've got, when you talked about Kopiansk earlier, I mean, there's no such thing as front lines anymore. The Russians are flag running to propaganda where they throw up a drone and they'll film two guys running a Russian flag to a point in Pokrovsk or Kopiansk. And then 2 minutes later, they just get smashed and die. That's how the war is now. And then you're not talking about a front line, you're talking about a 20-kilometer kill zone. So you don't want all your troops in that 20-kilometer kill zone. So the nature of war has changed even in 3 or 4 years since the full-scale invasion. And that's before you even get to things like Ukraine reducing Russia's dominance of the Black Sea and changing naval warfare forever with sea babies. I mean, this stuff doesn't get reported very much at all. And I think one of the biggest victories so far would be the fact that Ukraine, without a conventional navy, has beaten the Black Sea fleet. And now, where the Black Sea, where Russia had dominance, they don't have dominance of that anymore. Now it can ship grain through. And we don't have a conventional navy. And I was talking to Oksana Pechenuk, who was she's the first Ukrainian lady to pass through the Naval Academy in the UK, who's going to go on to just finishing her cadets in officer cadets in Ukraine. And she is an amazing woman who's just totally again blows out this perception that Ukraine only hires old people and old men and conscripting from the street. I was really interested to talk to her because she joined at 17. And then she went to training, and she's now at 20, just passing out her officer cadets. So I was really interested to get her on board and speak to her about her point of view and about the way things are going. And the first thing she brings up is, naval history, the Black Sea. We talk about, how Ukraine, one of the biggest Ukrainian victories, doesn't even get a mention. And that's probably changed naval warfare forever, And, I think that's where I like to jump on board with people like you, because we can tell people, what's actually happening on the ground. It's not perfect in Ukraine. We've got a lot of things that we need to improve on. However, it's nowhere near as bad as people seem to portray it is. Certainly living in Dnipro, I don't feel it's a city under stress yet. And considering the Russians are, if you watched X or social media platforms, you'd think the Russians taken Ukraine twice over by now. It's ridiculous. So, I think there's a lot to be said for us doing what we do and being able to interview and talk to these people, which is then diluting the Russians' influence in that space in social media. So when people talk to me about, I got rid of my X account because I want to go to Blue Sky. And I'm like, no, get back on your X account, because that's where the war is. That's where the fight is. You need to start reposting our stuff and reposting our tweets, and do both, but don't give up on things like X and because you think it's a bit tough. You need to get back on there and start reposting pro-Ukrainian stuff and the facts and people on the ground. That's what you need to be doing, because that's another front that Russia's really sort of capitalizing on, because it wants to wear you down. It wants to tell you Ukraine's not doing well. It wants to tell you that Ukraine's suffering and it's going to be beaten. I mean, that's where it hasn't moved on from, the Second World War. It's fully at war with Ukraine, is what I keep telling people, which, Russia wants to downplay it with an SMO and say it's a special military operation. And is it bollocks? They're at war with Ukraine and suffering really bad and losing. They're using China, Iran, as we touched on, Belarus, and they're really struggling, even with help from them, to even get, a couple of 100 kilometers further into Ukraine. So it's not a walk in the park for Russia. And people need to start realizing that. And that's where, yourself and I sort of try and tell people the realities of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. When they say that over the past quarter of the year, we proudly captured 3,000 square kilometers of Ukraine's territory. 2022, they would capture 1,500 square kilometers on a daily basis. And also, we are talking about, knowing Russians 100% that it's not 3,000 square kilometers, that it's approximately like 350, all right? Because according to the rules of the Russian arithmetics. But at the same time, even if it's like 3,000 square kilometers in a country that is as big as 500,000 square kilometers currently, all right, under Ukraine's control, doesn't sound really optimistic, all right, for the second army of the world, like not at all.
Oh, I say that all the time. I pretty much say that all the time. I said I think it was The Economist who brought out something this week which broke down the statistics that Russia had a lot of the ground before they did the full-scale invasion. So they were already in Crimea, already in parts of Donetsk Oblast. So essentially, it was they've taken, for 1.1 million Russian casualties, they've taken under 2% of the country, which if Putin would have been sacked 2 years ago in a Western government, his generals would have gone. I mean, that is just a massive failure that he can't take more than 2% of the country. in 4 years. I mean, he's got 20% of it, but a lot of that he had before the full-scale invasion. He started this invasion in 2014, as people know. So, it's not, he's not doing well. And now the economy's teetering. The oil refineries are struggling to produce the quantities they were, with a Russian budget that's made up of, a federal budget that's made up 40% of oil and gas revenues. Now they're not producing any of that. You don't have to be an economist to realize Russia's struggling. And we all speak to people in the occupied territories or know people in the occupied territories. So we know exactly what's going on in Russia. Yet you look at the media and the spin and you see what's being put on X. And like I said, you think Russia's already taken Ukraine twice. It's just such a non-even kill reporting, and that's down to a lot of. I think it's probably going to change. The propaganda is going to change over the next year or two. I think even RT Russia Today is having its budgets cut for 2027 by half. So you're going to see a lot of these Western accented media guys suddenly looking for jobs who want to come back into the real world because that good money they were earning before is not going to be there. But unfortunately, they're tarnished. They've pushed Russian propaganda out for years. They're always going to be Russian propaganda. So, I think the times are changing. I think certainly Western accented media guys are, look at Texas Bentley. He's been murdered by his own guys this year. So, I think the world's getting smaller for them because they're having less of an impact. And essentially, I can see you've put on the map there now.
Yeah.
Where we sit. Yeah, I mean, Russia have less ground than they had in 2022. Again, that doesn't get reported. It's like Russia's making gains. Hold on, they've lost, over 50% of what they had in 2022. They're making small gains, but generally they've not really. It's got worse. They don't hold as much ground as they did then. Now they lost their 8-year footing in the Middle East and Syria, dominance of the Black Sea. When you collate it all together, Russia's failing miserably. And this is meant to be, like you said, the second most powerful army in the world. And after 11 years, can't take Donetsk Oblast. It's just phenomenally bad. I mean, if you was in any other government in the West, you'd be sacked by now.
Absolutely. And Pokrovsk is 15 square miles.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was there a year ago and they were 8 kilometers from Pokrovsk. It's taken them a year to get 8 kilometers. And then they're on about, oh, yeah, we're going to move into Kiev. Oh, I don't think that's going to happen, at all within the next 2 years. So I honestly believe that, the propaganda machine is taking over now because militarily and economically, Russia's fucked. I mean, even if the war stopped tomorrow, it's going to spend the next 10 or 20 years trying to dig itself out of the mess it's just made. So I think there's more of an emphasis on Putin, Trump. Here we go, mistaking myself again. Trump to push this peace process because Russia's struggling. And if Russia signs a peace process, and I know that Russia's in a worse state than it's letting on. Because if it was winning, it would just keep steamrolling through. And generally, it's not winning. So if it eventually does sign a peace process, it'll be because he wants to reorganize and have another go later on, or it's in a worse state than we know. And Russia's and the Soviets had a history of getting themselves into that mess. And then suddenly, they've gone bankrupt again. So they've got previous. I think Russia's really in a worse state than it's letting on. And it's using Trump to sort of rescue her a bit, to be fair.
Absolutely. Only Trump can save Putin. And that is also what I'm always explaining to our friends and viewers, that the main reason they need to push those changes, to push Ukraine, to force Ukraine to sign something, anything, is because Russia is approaching its inevitable collapse. 2026 will be crucial and critical years for Russia in terms of artillery, in terms of armored vehicles, aviation as well, and of course in terms of the budget, because they will be spending more than 50% literally on the war, just throwing the money away. And that's tremendous money. Considering the smoking Russian oil refineries, considering everything, they see that Russia is collapsing and they need something very, very fast. They need someone to push those ultimatums to Ukraine, to force Ukrainians to, back up and stuff. We all understand why they're doing that. All right.
Absolutely.
And the only reason we keep fighting is because we don't want war anymore.
No, absolutely. I mean, most people in Ukraine understand that. I don't know America. It's very different because I think I described it to someone the other day, sort of saying, well, in America, you sort of rely, so big and so vast. Many have never gone out of America, and you rely upon your elected officials to give you the information that you want about the world, and they're making the best decisions for you. That's just not like that in America anymore. What you've got is you've got a lot of Russian influence who's paying people like Tenant Media to deliver that information on behalf of the Kremlin. And unfortunately, now you've got Trump, who's allegedly, got compromise on him, who's pushing Russian agenda and setting up business deals in Russia and trying to normalize the genocide that Russia's committing in Ukraine. And I think now people are starting to really, hold on a minute, what? Even Americans would sit there and say, what? They're starting to look at this now. Trump's popularity's dipped all of a sudden. Suddenly he couldn't do anything wrong when he was elected. Now he's taken a real dip because he's going against the grain of the American, electorate. So I think there's a lot of unhappiness. I think the midterms in America will decide how America feels about Trump. But I certainly think from what's going on, there's going to be a bit of a shock for Trump next year. And if he loses the midterms, he's not going to be able to pass anything. He's going to lose Congress. He's going to lose everything. So it will give us a good indication that where MAGA sit and where Trump sits moving into sort of the post-Trump era. I can't believe it's gone that quick. But I mean, people who are telling me that it's okay, we'll be back in 3 years. Where are the Democrats? J.D. Vance has got more of a heads up than any Democrats I've seen on the block at the moment. They're nowhere. So, if you think that Trump's bad, J.D. Vance is going to be exceptionally bad going forward. He hates Ukraine. Part of his network of business enterprises is his Rumble. He's one of the investors into Rumble. Who platforms their stuff on Rumble? Russia Today. The very people that were part of my torture. So, and the torture of many Ukrainians. So, if you think Trump's bad, J.D. Vance is going to be even worse. So, essentially, the midterms have got to cripple MAGA. Otherwise, we're going to look at possibly J.D. Vance getting elected, for his first term, which is deeply, deeply worrying.
I agree. And one thing that actually makes me a bit more optimistic about that is the very fact that Ukraine is striking the Russian oil industry so much these days. Because why? Because Russia is relying on its oil exports. We all know that. What makes Russian propaganda running? Basically money. Basically expenditures. Money. Yeah, and as soon as those money stop flowing, as soon as Tim Pool stops receiving his $100,000 fucking dollars for a single video on the YouTube, so as soon as all this collapses, the financing collapses, the Russian propaganda will be less effective, in my personal opinion. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I'm still waiting for Russians to come and ask me to pay me $100,000 for my propaganda videos. I was like, yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But maybe some Ukrainian oligarch will come and just say, here, look, pay $100,000. I'm doing it for free now, so I'm not exactly waiting for the money. But no, I totally agree. It's all to do with money. And they have no morals. They're not included. Trump's not about America first. He's about Trump first, the family first, and then America might come second. I personally, I couldn't care who runs America. I'm not going to tell people how to vote, but I am going to have an opinion when America has such a hold. How many times have you heard him say, I'm going to pull out of Ukraine, and not done it? Because he knows the value of it. He knows he wants to keep his foot in Ukraine, give 400 million in the military budget for the year, just keep his fingers in the pie in the Ukraine side, push the Russian narrative, and then sort of push their agenda to try and get my Nobel Peace Prize. If anything, Trump is so transparent in what he's trying to do. Because if Russia goes pop, he'll say, well, I helped you. I put 400 million into your weapons supplies and military aid. When really, it's not. He's pushing the Russian agenda more. He wants that more. He doesn't particularly. I put it nicely on another podcast. They sort of said, look, you've got to come to terms that the Trump administration just doesn't like Ukraine. Trump's never moved from Biden, Hunter Biden. The problem's here. He's never moved from Zelensky not helping him. He's stuck in the past. Even now, nearly, nearly a year after his inauguration, he's still pushing, it's Biden. I mean, the guy's stuck. He's stuck in the past, stuck in a rhetoric. And in 2 or 3 years' time, he'll still be blaming everything on Biden. He'll still be blaming Ukraine and still be pushing Russia. I don't think that's ever going to change. So, Europe's had a good long chance and a look at this and should have expected this to come. My disappointment is that Europe have lasted this long trying to appease Trump when clearly he's just, pro-Russian. And we can't do that anymore. I think that's changing now with a lot of the rhetoric. The only thing I agree with Trump on is that, Europe should spend, NATO should spend more on its defense. I've always said that, you can't rely upon America. But I think we're starting to look at that now. I don't mind paying more taxes in the UK if that means getting NATO better equipped to deal with Russia, which is inevitably going to come at some point. I mean, they're just imperialist by nature, having been over there and seen them. I know they're imperialist by nature, and the populace are not strong enough they won't ever protest. They can't. They've had their hands tied. They know they're going to get 12, 15 years in prison even if they talk negatively about the SMA. So it baffles me now when I see people talk about free speech and they're pro-Russian. Russian is banned Twitter, banned Facebook, banned YouTube, banned all the Western, social media platforms, and you can get 12 years for talking negatively about the SMO. So there is no free speech in Russia. So I'm absolutely baffled why anybody in the West would want to support that.
Absolutely. And I also completely agree with you. My friends and family that are in the chat will also confirm that when there were elections in the United States, I was saying, guys, whatever you or whoever you vote for, you will always make a proper decision, right? And I will never be telling you whom to vote for, but I will always have my personal opinion because it's important.
Yeah,
you should like Buddhists say, when you see Buddha, kill Buddha. All right, always question authorities, always doubt. All right, always question yourself. Don't turn people into kings and idols. All right, no gods and no kings. That should be your rule, because you are the person, you are somebody. And that is why I hear a lot of rant there in the commentaries today. By the way, someone told me in the commentaries that if not for Trump, you would never be sitting behind the negotiations table with the Russian terrorists. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much for that.
Oh
that's been amazing. That's so. Please explain to me why that's sort of anything we should be happy about at the moment. I really don't understand. For one thing, since Trump's tenure, the escalation on Ukrainian cities with missile attacks has gone up. There's been more deaths, more problems. The rhetoric's gone up. Actually, Trump has exacerbated the problem in Ukraine, not de-escalated it. So yeah, I'm quite happy to argue anybody that why they think Trump's been a benefit to anything. And me and you were obviously fighting during Trump's first tenure, which is what I keep talking about. I was in Mariupol on the front line, stopping Putin's advance when Trump was in his first tenure, where he did literally nothing apart deliver a few javelins that probably got used and spent in a couple of weeks that didn't deter Russia from invading Ukraine anyway. So he did nothing, and he's part of the problem that's led to where we are now. I wouldn't say he's the main problem. Certainly Cameron and Obama not doing anything when Russia invaded Crimea or East Ukraine was probably the majority of the problem. But certainly Trump is one of the culprits that's led us to this situation now. And he's saying that it's Biden's war. No, it was Trump's war. Trump was here when Putin was invading and did nothing about it. So, he's always trying to extract himself from the problem. It's not him. It's nothing to do with him. When essentially he was president for a full 4 years as Putin invaded Ukraine and did nothing about it. So yeah, whatever people say, he's pretty much part of the problem. Agree?
100%. Listen, he says, when Obama was the president, Russia invaded. When Biden was the president, Russia invaded. When Trump was president, the best president in the world, Russia did nothing. All right? Nobody, in 2018, nobody was shooting at us. Nobody was shelling us. We were just, having sunbaths, smoking.
That's
just sitting there on the positions, drinking beer, enjoying the Donbass sunshine and shit like that. My brigade fucking lost 4 men in 2019. We lost 4 men because of the Russian shellings, because of the Russian attacks. And that, by the way, was first and fucking biggest losses in my brigade. Not because we didn't do anything, we were good actually, but that was the first losses that my brigade suffered. And that's something I will never forget. That is something that he says, like, nothing was happening in Ukraine, during my presidency. Fuck that.
I could send him the videos of us in the trenches having the contacts. I mean, it's just like, where did they think their equipment came from? Their BTRs on all their weapons and hardware, it came from Russia. I mean, they were using the Ukraine as a polygon to get their special forces up to scratch. So they were bringing in and testing new artillery pieces in Ukraine with delay switches, new types of artillery, new types of drones. Where did you think they tested them? In Ukraine. That was Russia, what Russia was doing. So, I listened to this garbage from people. Most pundits that are pro-Russian don't actually ever get out of the countries they're in. Have you noticed that? Like we're talking, we're in Ukraine, we're doing this. Most of the pundits that are on YouTube and stuff are generally stuck in other countries within Europe, in America. Look at Tucker Carlson. Has he ever been to Ukraine? I don't think so. But he's the foremost opinionated man in America on Ukraine. Yet he's totally pro-Russian. Alex Jones, another one. Has he ever been to Ukraine? No. But, he's another one in America that's promoting Russian agenda, but I don't think I've ever seen him in Russia, to be fair. So all these people are like armchair critics, are having a field day just promoted, and Russia pays the money to do that. I have no doubt that most of those are on the take, in some form of another on the take. Even
in the UK, sorry for interrupting. In the UK recently, one dude from Reforms was arrested, right?
Yeah, Nathan Gill. Yeah, he's a reform candidate. But that's even Farage has got his links to Russia. He, in an interview, I think it was with Panorama, was portraying him as a very strong leader, and he's detached himself from Nathan Gill, but certainly previous to this arrest and sentencing of Nathan Gill, where he openly admitted to briberies from the Russians to push Russian agenda in the European Parliament, then Farage has got history in that same. He was a regular on RT, Russia Today, and suddenly stopped, and now he's like, no, I don't agree with Putin invading Ukraine. I'm not sure that's the case. Farage would say anything to get in government in the UK, absolutely anything. And he idolizes Trump, which is, that's going to set the alarm bells ringing. But they're playing on the immigration issue. It's exactly the same as they did in America. They're doing the same thing in the UK on a smaller scale. Farage is pretty much a Trumpoid. Essentially has got Russian links. So, and Nathan Gill's a part of that who's just been convicted. So, it goes on in the UK considerably. There's a lot of Russian money in the UK. It's certainly not America bashing. The UK has got its own problems, except for, I would say, probably America's in a deeper problem with this, with a lot of their propaganda, whereas the UK essentially they're closer to the problem in Ukraine and really heavily support Ukraine. So people like Nigel Farage don't want to say too much to alienate the popular vote, which he's going for. So, but I have no doubt with the arrest and the conviction of Nathan Gill that Russia has its paws in reform.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to slowly wrap it up. All right, because it's like we're
can
moving.
Talk all night. No problems at all.
Yeah, but people also tired. It's Friday night. We're stealing people's chance to spend time with their families, drink a cold one with their buddies and stuff like that. So we should also understand that. But before we end today's stream, I'd like to show you something that I actually consider the best portrait of the Russian female's life cycle. All right, here we have it. So the picture on the left and the picture on the right. Basically, it tells all we need to know about how to become a successful Russian woman. Do you know that joke?
He was a second lieutenant, wasn't he? I saw his post the other day. He was like a second lieutenant in the Russian
yeah. Did you hear that joke? Like, what's the name for a female orc?
No.
A widow?
Oh, right. Oh, my God, you've even got the sound effects. That's amazing. Oh, my God.
Yes. Sorry, guys. We all love dark humor in this part of the YouTube. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, first of all, I would like to say big thanks to you, my friend, for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure, it's a privilege to have you here. And also big thanks to all our brave moderators there in the chat, everyone who were and are still watching us tonight. Big thanks, and also big thanks to all the supporters of my channel, but which is even more important, supporters of Ukrainian armed forces, Ukrainian defenders, and our freedom. Thank you so much. And also the supporters of Car for Ukraine. Guys, we are starting the fundraiser for Rubish, for my brigade, all right? And we'll be talking more about that as well. Miroslav Brutovy, Tom, hello there in the chat. So maybe there's like a message that you would like to pass to our viewers before we call it a night.
Keep your hope. If you lose hope, everything else is gone. So you've got to keep hope and keep the fight going. We haven't got a choice, but keep going and keep hoping. It's an undervalued emotion. We don't promote it in the military, really. If you rely upon hope, then you haven't planned correctly. So, but when you've been in prison and captivity, then sometimes hope's all you've got left when every shred of humanity and decency has been taken from you. So keep your hope. It's not over until the fat lady sings, and she's not anywhere near this yet. So I wish you all good night, and thank you for watching.
Thank you so much, my friends. Hope, my dear friends, motivation. We should stick together and motivate each other, because there is one thing that Russian propaganda is unable to produce, physically unable, is motivational things, motivational content, things that inspire people. They can always demoralize, demotivate, and that is something that we should always keep in mind and fight. Zrada included, this good old Ukrainian zrada, we should always fight it with motivation, good spirits, and courage. So, my dear friends, thank you so much for watching. Shaun, it's a pleasure, it's a privilege, and I really hope to see you more on the streams, maybe on my channel, maybe on your channel. We will talk about that. And my dear friends, also have something good, something tasty tonight, because we all deserve that. My name is Operator Starsky, Shaun Pinner. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, be safe.